Hello, everyone. My name is Victor. I am the Occult technician, and this is Mind War, Season 2, Episode 2.
Today's episode is brought to you by the Kill Podcasters Network, featuring Dumbheads, Piss Magazine, American Death Camp, Experience Old Wincock, The Couch Philosopher, and Mind War, in association with Nope Productions. Now, back to the show!
On this season of Mind War, we're working from the book titled First Earth Battalion by author Lieutenant Colonel Jim Chinon, where we learned what it meant to be a warrior monk of the First Earth Battalion. We talked about being a citizen samurai, right? We talked about being an evolutionary instead of a revolutionary. And that was simply understanding that revolutions come about because we are not focusing on the future, right? Instead, we are revolting or responding to a series of events that has gotten us to our current situation. Maybe we're not in the best Aristos, right? We're in a bad scenario. So, what we're going to learn here in Season 2, again, is to focus more long-term, right? So again, we're filming this at the end of 2023, and our goal, let's look at what life will be like, not just for ourselves and our country and Earth, right? We're going to look at what things might be like in 2030. Set some goals. What do you want your life to be like in 2030, right? And again, if you're listening to this into the future, just think 10 years from now, what do you want your life to be like? Because again, we're taking the tactics that we find in books like Mind War, books like the First Earth Battalion. We're taking those tactics that might be meant for more of a global scale, and we're applying them to our personal lives in order to overcome some of the troubles we might be facing, some of the issues that we face, right? And now we can, in a way, not just focus them personally, but start to focus them also to our families, our friends, our jobs, our schools, our communities, and really start to think outward a little bit also, right? So to pick up where we left off, we're on a page titled Changing Values, okay? So one of the things that we understand in life is that it's always changing, it's always evolving. We talked about that in the last episode. You will evolve throughout your entire life. From birth to death, you are always evolving. You're always changing. One issue that we often see is that evolution, our own personal evolutions, can often be more subconscious than conscious. We just evolve because that's what society tells us to. Basically, what I'm talking about here is maybe going to specific schools, getting into specific careers, liking different hobbies, right? Being a sports fan or joining the military or going into a specific career because that's what your family members do and things like that. What we want to do is, again, get out of the subconscious and into the conscious. Can we consciously evolve? Can we start to plan some of our evolution instead of just allowing nature to take its course, right? Can we be powerful enough in ourselves to guide our own evolution? So let's see what the book has to say about changing values. So there is a chart on this page that is extremely small, and I had to actually take a picture of it with my phone here so I can read it. But let's start with the opening here. A leaderless but powerful network is now working to bring about radical but positive change in the United States. Its members have broken with certain elements of Western thought and may even have broken conformity with history. This is a quote from Marilyn Ferguson, The Aquarian Conspiracy from St. Martin's Press. That must be a book. That might be an interesting book to look into. So what are some of the changing values that she talks about here in this chart? Let's go through those real quick here. Sorry, there we go. So this chart we have, let's see, we'll start with power in politics. We have one column that says old paradigm and one column that says the new paradigm. So number one for power in politics. Impetus towards strong central government, that's the old paradigm. And the new paradigm is favors reversing that trend, decentralizing government wherever feasible, horizontal distribution of power. So again, I think we're talking about that top-down government, the top of the pyramid type control structures, moving more towards a horizontal distribution of power. Number two, the old paradigm is either pragmatic or visionary. The new paradigm, we can be pragmatic and visionary. So that means pragmatic is, being realistic, understanding that there are limitations that we have, but also being visionary in our goals, right? I think that's often where when we see projects being done on large scales through the organizations, corporations, and institutions in our life, we often see that they get bogged down in the pragmatism and they're not very visionary, right? They're not very future oriented. And we end up spending all this time and money and not really upgrading, right? We just end up being stagnant and just kind of a new veneer on an old idea. Number three, government to keep people in line, playing a disciplinary role as a benevolent parent. The new paradigm would be a government to foster growth, creativity, cooperation, transformation, and synergy. And I love this idea. I think that we have gotten into a very unfortunate place, not just here in the United States, but probably around the world, where governments become these disciplinarians. We're constantly in fear of the government, right? You're always afraid that you get that knock on the door, And it's an unfortunate characterization, right? I think it's very unnecessary, but it comes about through that us versus them mentality that we're taught throughout our lives, right? From learning sports when it's your team versus their team. As you go into business, there's always that corporate competition, your company versus their company. Instead of understanding, no, we're all together in this, right? It doesn't have to be this us versus them type of thinking. Number four, humankind as conqueror of nature and exploitive view of resources. The new paradigm is humankind in partnership with nature with an emphasis on conservation and ecological sanity. So, of course, that's very important, right? The environment, environmentalism. We talked a little bit about focusing on things like pollution. We can see it, we can fix it, we can change it, right? And if you are someone who doesn't necessarily have a purpose and a goal and a strategy that you're working towards, environmentalism is not a bad topic to really attach yourself to, right? What what is a more noble cause than saving the earth, keeping the environment clean, and being a good steward of our planet? So let's go on to economics. The old paradigm, number one, promotes consumption at all costs via planned obsolescence, advertising pressure, and creation of artificial needs. The new paradigm would be appropriate consumption, conserving, keeping, recycling, quality, and craftsmanship. Now, folks, that is a very interesting term, okay? Appropriate consumption versus this consumption at all costs, where we talk about materialism and just, we've seen it. I know I've seen it throughout my life. That's really what life here in the United States has been, is this materialism, this abundance of things, constantly buying things, right? Constantly throwing things away. I know personally, over the last 2 years, and this is just a small example, but the amount of trash that goes into my trash bag and goes out to the curb now is literally half a bag of trash that goes out. And every week it's almost the same type of things that I'm throwing away. I try my very best to recycle and separate things the best I can. But there has been a major decrease in the amount of trash that I use, and that's simply through a change in lifestyle, a change in habits that I do through life, right? But back to that appropriate consumption. And here's kind of an idea, because again, we're thinking between now and what things might be like in 2030, right? Appropriate consumption, let's say when it comes to the topic of food, right? So what if in the future, every person has their BMI calculated, their body mass index, right? And it says, based on your BMI, the amount of calories that you need to be healthy is X, right? We calculate the amount of calories that you need to stay healthy. So one of the measures that could be put in place, and again, this is futuristic thinking. These are things that may come down the path in the future. What if, as you purchase food and consume food throughout the day, let's say your appropriate consumption calorie count is, say, 3,000 calories a day. We'll be generous, right? And through something like a central bank digital currency, through something like a cryptocurrency, where your spending habits are a little are more controllable, we see that any food that you purchase up to that 3,000 calorie mark has a baseline of cost, right? So up to 3,000 calories, the food is going to be very cheap. It's inexpensive. And that would actually give more people access to healthier foods, right? Because anything under that initial calorie count, right, is going to be cheaper. But now, if you start to purchase above your 3,000 calorie requirement for the day, now the price of any food you add on top of it is skyrocketed, right? So maybe you go to a fast food place, you go in the morning for breakfast, you order your breakfast, and the combo meal, the combo breakfast meal is $10, right? And then you get your lunch, and that's another $10. You get your dinner, another $10. Now you've met your 3,000 calorie mark. But on top of that, you're going in your purchasing excessive amounts of food that go above the calories, and now those same combo meals would be, say, $20, $30, $40, right? So again, future thought, I don't know if this is how it's going to be, But these are some of those ideas that might be kind of being floated around and things that we need to think about that are going to control our appropriate consumption. All right. So that's economics. This is all going to work together because, again, if we look back, we want to move away from mankind being a conqueror of nature who is exploitive of the resources, right? If you are overeating, if you are constantly consuming so much more food and calories than your body needs to sustain a healthy living, you are being exploitive of those resources. You're using more than you actually need, right? Number 2, aggression, competition, and business is business. That's the old paradigm. The new paradigm would be cooperation, human values transcend winning, as in new games. Play hard, play fair, nobody hurt, okay? So again, through business, we see all that competition, making money at all costs, no matter what it means, no matter how underhanded it might be. If we can move away from those type of things, and if we can move away from that competitive nature, right? And it's going to be difficult because it's not about doing away with competition, right? Because that's a human nature. That's part of our human nature. That's an instinct, is to be competitive. It's really about moving that competitive nature into something else, right? Maybe a game, a hobby, or something that you're doing, getting it out of your system. So when you're talking about business and you're talking about, again, those limited resources, we are working more on a cooperative level where human values are what's most important, not just making money. Number 3, short-sighted exploitation of limited resources, kind of like we've already talked about there. The new paradigm would be ecologically sensitive to ultimate costs and stewardship. Again, stewardship of the planet. It doesn't have to just be the stewardship of the environment and of the planet as a whole. That can, although that's a good theme to work with in your life, because it's so large, it can often be difficult to grasp, right? So think of the term stewardship more in your own life. How can we be good stewards of the things in our own lives, right? Our finances, our home, our friends and family, and our relationship. How do we be good stewards to ourselves? Number 4, rational, trusting only data. Rational was in quotes. That's the old paradigm of economics. The new paradigm would be rational and intuitive, data logic augmented by hunches, feelings, insights, nonlinear, holistic sense of patterns. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about pattern recognition. That's part of that subconscious life that we live. As we go throughout life, we subconsciously recognize patterns, and that can often lead to our behavior, right? So instead of finances only being specifically black and white, we're talking here about how can we grow in the financial system? How can we grow with our personal finances by using some intuition, by using some of our intuitive thoughts to actually, again, be better stewards of our own personal finances. And then centralized operations, the old paradigm. The new paradigm, we want to move towards decentralized operations wherever possible, human scale. So this is a big topic that we see right now with the talk of cryptocurrencies, with the talk of central bank digital currencies and things like that, right? A lot of time we hear fear around that. People are afraid of them. On a personal level, people are afraid because they think they're going to be tracked and controlled. There may be part of that associated with these new technologies. We'll find out, right? And then on the banking side, they fear things like cryptocurrencies because they would lose control, right? If people right now, when you make a transaction, when you send money to someone, right? If I was to send money from person A to person B, it has to go through a bank at some point, right? It's called the automated clearinghouse. It is a program where your money goes into this third party, and you say, "Hey, I'm going to send $100 to this person." That other person says, "Hey, I'm supposed to be receiving $100 from this person," and then the automated clearinghouse approves it and sends it on. With new forms of technology, that money can just go directly from one person to the next. There is no third party out there. And again, banks, they may, because of the old paradigm, which is that centralized operation, they fear that because they would lose control. But again, what we need to be looking at is saying this is going to open up whole new avenues for revenue streams for all of us, right? It's not something that any organization, corporation, institution should fear. And it's also not something that the individual consumer should fear, right? The next item here is medicine. Old paradigm, number one, treatment of the symptoms. The new paradigm is search for patterns and causes, plus treatment of symptoms. Again, this book was written in the 70s, almost 50 years ago. Over the last few years, our medical community and the medical issues that we have dealt with worldwide, I'm sure, have changed from that treatment of the symptoms to where we are now tracking how these diseases spread, what causes them, and how we can prevent them, right? That's a better goal, is to prevent the disease from occurring in the first place than having to just treat the symptom once you're already sick, right? Number two, professionals should be emotionally neutral. That's the old paradigm. The new paradigm here says that professionals should be caring as a component of healing. Now, I don't know. I mean, maybe in the 50s, when you think about the doctors in the white robes and the nurses in their white robes and the very institutional feeling of hospitals in the medical system, some of that still exists. But I know personally that when I have interacted with my healthcare providers, they are very caring, right? They want to focus on the healing just as much as I do. And they've been very kind. So again, this was written 50 years ago, so hopefully some of the things that were written here, and whether the author was the first person that wrote about this or not, it doesn't matter. But the values, the changing values he's talking about, we can see over the last 50 years maybe taking effect in some of these areas, and that's exciting. Number three for medicine, the old paradigm. Body and mind are separate. Psychosomatic illness is mental, may be referred to a psychiatrist. The new paradigm. Body, mind, perspective. Psychosomatic illness is province of all healthcare professionals. Okay. This is a great topic. We're going to dive deeper into this in future seasons of Mind War about the body and the mind being separate. And the reason that I say that is from the Gateway Experience tapes. Once you start to listen to them, folks, and again, we're going to talk about this in detail in future seasons, right? We'll get there. Don't worry. When you listen to those tapes, when you experience what Dr. Monroe is teaching you, you absolutely understand that your mind and body are not, these separate things, right? You understand that they are one and that they work in harmony. Through the Gateway Experience tapes, your mind, right, which in some ways is our physical representation of our spirit or our soul, right? You are able to feel like you are leaving your body. So there is a separation there. But through that process, you understand, okay, no, these things really are together. They really are one. It's very interesting. And again, we'll get more into that in the future, folks. Medicine number 4, the old paradigm is placebo effect shows the power of suggestion. The new paradigm is the placebo effect shows the mind's role in disease and healing. All right. I mean, that's huge, folks. Your perspective, how you think and how you act, and all of these things are very important when it comes to healing. If you go into a new healing system, right? If you go into it with a bad attitude, an attitude of failure, an attitude of this isn't going to work, then folks, it's just not going to work for you. We hear that with people who are dealing with drug and alcohol addiction. That no matter how much treatment you get, if you are not ready to stop using drugs and alcohol, the treatment will always fail. It's a mindset, right? And that's something, that mindset, we can put, think of this in all aspects of your life, right? Think of that idea, that theme of, if you're not ready to quit drinking, if you're not ready to quit drugs, it's not going to, no matter the treatment that you get, it's just not going to work. You can apply that same thought process to other areas of your life, right? And the last one here is education. So the old paradigm number 1, emphasis on content, acquiring the body of right information once and for all. That's the old paradigm. The new paradigm is emphasis on learning how to learn, how to ask good questions, pay attention to the right things, be open to and evaluate new concepts, have access to information, what is now known may change, and the importance of context. Well, in my lifetime, especially as a kid going to school, it was really a combination of both. Of course, we were told to, go through the factory style learning, right? The factory style education system, where you sit in a specific chair in a specific room for a certain amount of time, and then the bell rings and you move to the next one and you consume the information you're being given, even though it's boring and has no relation to your life whatsoever, and you may never use it again. That's the assembly line. That's the assembly line of education, right? While that was happening, there was also classes that I was learning more on that emphasis on how to learn. And that honestly started to take place more when I got out of school and I started my career. I had to apply that because I was not necessarily being given information just for the content sake of knowing that information. People saying, part of the criteria of this education system is you have to learn the following things. Once you get into the workforce, you realize, oh, now we have to solve a problem, right? And this problem may not have a predetermined set of information that you can just grab from. You might have to find and solve these issues yourself, and that's where learning how to learn is so important. It's tough today. We see Unfortunately, through the use of technology and again, these old paradigms of government thought and the organizations, institutions, corporations that are so powerful in our lives today, they don't want to lose that power. They want to force a specific set of information guidelines and standards, and they don't care about context or no, this is what you have to learn, this is what you have to do, and anything outside of that becomes demonized and attacked, right? And that's sad. That to me goes against those utopian ideals I had as a younger man when I was working in the information technology field and thinking, wow, this is awesome. Things like the internet, things like databasing, these are really going to change our lives. We're going to have free access to real information and be able to solve issues. And that's not the case, right? We don't always see that being the answer. We see everything today, with AI and stuff, everything that's going on with artificial intelligence. They're being censored. They have just the same bigotry, right? No matter what form that bigotry comes in, whichever side of the aisle you might be on, you can still be a bigot on whichever side, right? You can still try to force that specific amount or type of information that you want. And that's kind of what we're seeing. And it's unfortunate. Again, it goes away from that utopian ideal of having access to real, true information to help solve issues and move forward. Number 2, this is again for education. Learning as a product, a destination. The new paradigm, learning as a process or a journey. Okay. Learning as a destination. Easy. Did you graduate from high school? Did you graduate from college or university? Did you get your degree? What level of degree did you get? These destination levels, right? These different layers up the ladder of education. It doesn't work that way, folks. Maybe it did 100 years ago. Maybe it did 50 years ago when you were training to do a job that you knew was going to be the same job your entire 30, 40-year career. That is not the reality of life anymore, right? Throughout my IT career, which lasted about 20 years, the real solid professional chunk of it, it was constantly in flux, constantly changing. Every few years, upgrades, major upgrades that truly changed the complete paradigm shifts in how the companies that I worked for were functioning, right? And today, we're still here. We're still learning, right? I'm just an old guy here with the white beard, right? I'm still learning. Again, we're reading this book together. I told you in the last episode, I think, that I haven't actually read this whole book yet. I went through the first few pages and thought it was so cool that I wanted to discover it along with you. So we are constantly learning in that journey. It is our lifetime of self-evolution, right? Constantly evolving, being evolutionaries, controlling the evolution of our life instead of being revolutionaries and just reacting to things that different situations that we find ourselves being forced into. We can take some control of that evolution and again have that long-term, that evolutionary outlook on life. We today, again, recording in 2023, at the end of 2023, we're thinking, what is life going to be like in 2030? What do we need to plan for to have a better life, a more positive life, one where we've taken control of some of the issues that we're battling with today, that we've We've overcome some of the negative aspects of our life. And now we've prepared for what things can be like by 2030, right? And again, if you're listening to this in the future, I'm flattered. It's exciting. And you just think, what is your 5-10 year plan, right? Let's see. Education number 3, the old paradigm, priority on performance, right? That's the old paradigm. How did you perform? What was your grade on your test? What grade did you get for the class, right? That's performance. The new paradigm would be priority on self-image as the generator of performance, okay? This is interesting because, of course, when we're talking about education, when we're talking about doing certain jobs and things like that, your self-image and all that, yes, it's important because you want to be confident in your job and things like that. But for a lot of jobs, there is no gray area, right? We're dealing with mathematical things that, whether it's the flow of water, the flow of electricity, the flow of consumer goods, the flow of information. These are very mathematical things, and you have to have the right knowledge to do this. It's not about what you think should happen or how you think it should be or how you feel about a specific subject. That doesn't necessarily matter when you're trying to get the water to flow, the electricity to flow, right? But it is very important as you go throughout your day to have that positive self-image, right? And again, that's why we continue to work, evolve, gain new knowledge, get to that point to where we do have a positive self-image. Let's see, number 4, emphasis on analytical, linear, left brain thinking. The new paradigm strives for a whole brain education, augments left brain rationality with holistic, nonlinear, and intuitive strategies. Now, holistic thought and intuitive thought were just, for me, subjects that were just not taught, not only in school, but at home, in our culture, in our society, just were things that just really weren't thought of throughout my lifetime. And if it was, you were some hippy-dippy, peace and love people, and you were just ignored and laughed at, right? And that's unfortunate, because I think if we have more of that holistic and intuitive thought processes, right, we're going to, again, make those paradigm shifts into what the author talked about in the last episode of creating that paradise, right? Striving for paradise. Why not? Why not strive for the Aristos? And number 5, concern with norms. That's the old paradigm. The new paradigm, concerned with individuals' performance in terms of potential. Again, when we come from a education system that it was built like a factory, where they needed robots to basically sit in the same seat and learn the same things and do the same tasks over and over again, the concern with the norms fitting into what is, the normal, perfect, job description, right? Now we can move away from that a little bit, because a lot of those tasks hopefully are starting to get automated, those kind of repetitive things, and now we can think outside the box a little bit and not be so focused on the norms. We can start to express ourselves a little bit, and that's a good thing, right? Allowing every individual to truly be individuals instead of this, what we've talked about before in some of my other art and some of my other videos, this fake conformity of individualism, right? Where we're all told we're individuals, but we're not. It's truly not. It's individuality with boundaries, right? So if we can move on to really getting to know ourselves and really pushing kind of nonconformity to its limits, just to see where it goes, because again, this is a evolutionary process, right? So on the next page here is titled Universe. It has a picture of a planet with another smaller planet circling it. There is 5,000 years of evidence that evolution is a constant. Higher states of order and cooperation continue to be the trend for all systems. Earthkind has grown from pack to village, and then from village to tribe, then from tribe to territory, and from territory to nation. It's time to go from nation to planet. The First Earth Battalion declares its primary allegiance to the planet, our home. So again, evolution is constant. This is that idea of as above, so below, right? Earth is constantly evolving, our home, our larger home. The universe is constantly evolving. It's expanding. It's changing, right? That's above. That's the big picture change. We, again, as individuals, are constantly evolving, right down to our atomic structure. Our atoms, our cells are constantly growing for a certain part of our lives. Our cells are evolving into stronger, right? Larger as we're growing and getting older. And then at some point, the cells start to get weaker as we hit on the backside of our life and we are descending towards what comes next, right? Now, the idea of going from a nation to a planet, okay? That's going to be very difficult for people to overcome. And again, it's ingrained, I know, in American society and probably more throughout societies throughout the country or throughout the world now, in things like professional sports. Sports teach us tribalism, our team against your team. Those then get moved into politics, our side of the political aisle versus your side of the political aisle, right? Our type of religion versus your type of religion, even when it's in the same category of religion, right? We have countless denominations of Christianity that are constantly battling it out with each other, you know? So again, there's this constant need for this kind of team sports mentality. And that's what keeps that division of the planet. So again, like we've talked about before, you know, this idea of a new world order, moving into a planetary existence, understanding that we live in nations without borders where people can easily travel from one place to the next. The problem with that we're seeing today is, yes, we have the new world, but we don't have the order. We have people flowing through the borders without any type of order, without any type of identification or purpose or plans, that, or at least there's no plan that we're being told of. And again, unnecessary. It didn't have to be this negative thing, immigration on a large scale. We could have easily been communicated to as citizens by our government and said, here's why we're doing it. Here's why we need more people in our country. Here are the type of people that we're welcoming in. Here's the type of jobs that they're going to have as we move forward. We have to understand that maybe our current population is aging, and if we don't welcome new people into our country today, and again, we're having that evolutionary thought, what is life going to be like 10, 20, 30 years from now? You know, here in the United States, we may see that if we had completely closed the borders and never let anyone else in, we would see a population that was shrinking, and ultimately our progress into the future would shrink. We would have less people working towards these better goals and progressive futuristic ideas, right? So we need to move past that nation state thinking and move into a planetary thinking. And that starts locally, right? It starts with you and your friends, working together, overcoming the differences that you might have, and creating new and lasting relationships. Because again, we're taking these tactics and we're applying them to our personal lives. The next page here is titled Rainbow Power. We have a picture of a man, again, in a star-like position with his arms out and his legs out. And in his abdomen, there's a picture of the First Earth Battalion logo. And it says, let's see, we have an arrow pointing to vision, heart, soul, balance, and grace. And these are, let's see, obviously each piece has some or all of the qualities. What has been selected, sorry, this is really small writing, special qualities uniquely needed for the larger blend of all humanity, of all humankind, right? So these are simply specific ideas that different groups of people bring to the table. So let's read on what the author says about rainbow power. The possible human takes, let's see, is that right? The possible human takes the power for service from the best qualities found in each race. Okay. The black race gives us our soul and the capacity to feel and taste the moment. The brown race gives us our heart and the capacity to live the extremes with life and with each other. The white race gives us our vision and the capacity to imagine what it is not and plan to get there. Stay with me, folks. The red race gives us our grace and the capacity to live in harmony with Mother Earth. And the yellow race gives us our balance and the capacity to integrate all the other dimensions without getting stuck in any one of them. Okay. So, again, this was written in the 70s, folks. So we have to understand that language has changed. I had read this page before and have thought about, how we're going to address this. And part of the Mind War series is dealing with some of those very blatant mind war, psychological operations, tactics that are going on right now to divide people. So we just heard races described by color. Color only. Black, brown, white, red, yellow. This was the terminology that was used in the past. Today, that type of terminology would probably be considered racist, right? Now, one of those tools or tactics that are used against us is if you're filling out a survey today and they want to ask your demographics. This happens to me quite often, and I've noticed that when you look at the options that are available, there are only 2 colors on the list anymore. And truly, only one of them is actually just described as a color. And we'll start with that one, and that is white. When I go to fill out a survey about my demographics, the only option that I have to choose is white. Sometimes you might see Caucasian, which I'm not really sure even what that means. I don't know where the Caucasus are. I don't really know the history of them, and maybe that's something I need to look into. The next option that you might see that has a color would be Black/African American. That, again, is a color, but what is added to it is now a nationality, and really 2 nations. Really the continent of Africa, and then the nation of America. All right. And then you might see things like Native American, whereas now that description would be almost like an ethnicity and a nationality, right? You might see Pacific Islander, again, more of that nationality. Where are they coming from? What is the actual location? And then there may be different, Hispanic would be one, which I think Hispanic is actually, again, a description of an ethnicity, not a color. And then you might see Asian, right? So is it racist when we see these type of demographic questions and surveys and there are only 1 or 2 colors listed? Should we go back to how it used to be? If someone wants to know your race, that you have to choose which of the 5 skin colors that you fit in? I don't know, folks, right? What's more important? Because at this point, let's say you have white skin and you have relations with someone with black skin and you create a brown child, right? That child may not have anything to do with any of the options that are available on that list, right? These type of things, these type of terms, this type of terminology is used to divide us. And it's unnecessary, and it's sad. It's sad how much power those terms still have in today's society. And today, in, again, 2023, they seem to be more powerful than ever. And it's just ridiculous. It's something that we should have moved past long ago. But we are still being forced to fight these old paradigms. Instead, we're going to celebrate the things that each of these different groups of people, each of these different demographics bring to the table. Again, our capacity to taste and feel the moment, our capacity to have a full heart during the extremes of life, our capacity to imagine and plan for the future. Because again, that's what we're talking about here, that evolutionary life. What is life going to be like in the future? Having the grace and the harmony with Mother Nature. Again, as we move into the future, What is our relationship with the planet? What is our relationship with our home? And the balance to integrate all of these things together, right? These, the author describes, are different potentials. These are different gifts that are given to different races. Okay, again, this was written 50 years ago. Our goal is to integrate all of these things together as individuals, to learn all of these different things and apply them in our own lives, right? Next page. Soft tactics. Personal evolution. Okay, we've been talking about evolution here. Be all you can be. I think that ended up being an army slogan. There are many cultural pressures against improving yourself. Self-indulgence has been a label used to stifle many of the human potential courses. The fact is, you have very little you can contribute to others if you don't keep yourself in evolutionary shape. We don't really have any serious alternative than to be wonderful. I mean, he nails it right on the head, folks. The cultural pressures against improving yourself. Think about what we talked about in Mind War Season 1. When you are going to start making positive changes in your life, be careful not to announce them until they've taken effect. Because if you start talking, if you and your buddies, the majority of time you spend together, you're normally drinking, and you start talking about not wanting to drink as much, they are going to come against you. And they're going to do everything they can to make you drink more, right? If you are overweight, and most of your friends and family are overweight, you start talking about going on a diet, and they will attack you. And the reason is, folks, is not because they're mad that you want to change. It's because they're afraid of changing themselves. They're afraid that they don't have the ability, the power, the strength to make those changes. And they're so worried about seeing you become better because of the effect it's going to have on their life. They would rather see you continue to suffer, right? You got to be careful. Make those changes covertly. Allow them to sink in. And then there's no stopping you. Again, the picture we have here is the man or the person with the chakras and the pyramid on his head. This picture's been used multiple times. Next page, evolutionary tactics. Expanding ourselves and our systems into higher states of order should be the primary curriculum of any discipline. Put this material in a binder and begin to navigate through the wonder. Expanding ourselves and our systems into higher states of order. Where do you see disorder in your personal life? Is it in your health? Is it in your eating and exercising? Is it just your surroundings? Is your home falling apart? Is your home always dirty? These small things can add up and have big negative consequences on our life, right? And we can start to, through the curriculum of any discipline, we can start to make those broader changes. And that starts with any type of discipline. If you find yourself in a multi-layered bad situation, unhealthy eating, unhealthy habits of drugs and alcohol, unhealthy addiction to video games or social media or staring at the screen all day, in combination with a dirty house, in combination with a difficult relationship, right? And when you're in that situation, you find yourself that you don't really have any discipline, any hobbies, anything that you can focus on. So your discipline is only focused on maintaining that negative. You might say, well, I'm not a disciplined person. Bullshit. You are so disciplined because every day you go and you get that fast food. Every day you go like clockwork and you buy that alcohol. Every day you go and you buy those drugs. Every day you turn that video game on and play it for fucking 8 hours. You are disciplined. You have disciplined yourself into living in a filthy house. So don't tell me you're not disciplined. I know you are. You are pattern thinkers. You are caught in a pattern. It takes just one change. One positive change, right? So let's say you find yourself in that multi-layered negative life. And you decide, you know what, I'm going to start exercising a little bit. I'm going to start training with martial arts, right? Again, I'm not a martial artist. I do very, I don't do a ton of exercise, but it's mostly stretching, light weights, things like that. But what can happen is when you find just even the tiniest new discipline to follow that has a positive aspect, that will start to grow. It's going to start to spread. In the discipline that you learn through your new exercise regimen, through your new healthy eating habits, those are going to spread into the other areas of your life. It's how this works. It's awesome. It truly is, right? You start that new pattern of meditation. You start listening to the Gateway Experience tapes. You start getting on a weekly or bi-weekly spiritual development process. Again, for myself, you've seen throughout my art, I do my spiritual work on the full moon and the new moon, right? These are events that occur every month outside of the Gregorian calendar. These are things that I know the new moon is coming, and I know the full moon is coming. There's plenty of time in between where I'm not bogged down in spiritual work and constantly thinking about it. But I know on a routine basis and on a pattern, and I find myself now being hungry for those new moons, being hungry for those full moons when they come, because I love and appreciate my spiritual practices now, right? They don't become some burden freaking chore that you have to do on Sunday mornings at noon and go to this place, and it's just another chore that I have to do. It's just another character that I have to put on, right? Just like putting on the character when I go to work, putting on the character when I go to school, fitting in with what everyone else tells me. You can break away from those things. You can create your own spiritual processes, your own spiritual practices. And when you do, again, they create those new patterns in your life. They allow you to find peace and tranquility and increase your health, increase your healing, and create those new patterns in life. Next page, roots. We have a picture of a $1 bill with a focus on the pyramid with the all-seeing eye floating above it. All nations and all people have been represented in the roots of this country. Warriors of the Spirit can see many values captured in the most widely commercialized piece of printed material in history, the $1 bill. First, we see E pluribus unum describes the mixing of the races as an ultimate mission. Next, the eagle faces the olive branch, indicating peace is the preferred tactic. And finally, the pyramid is capped by the spiritual eye, indicating the order of the ages is to be completed by the Spirit. It is America's role to lead the world to paradise. It's pretty interesting, folks. E pluribus unum, out of many becomes one. Again, that's what I was taught as a child, multiculturalism, appreciating each other's race, appreciating each other's culture and ethnicity and celebrating it. We see less and less of that today. We see a hardening of each other's races and a hardening of each other's cultures, walling them off, not sharing them with each other. It is going in the wrong direction. It's sad, it's negative, and we need to get away from it. We need to go back to those Coca-Cola commercials where we're singing about the world being as one. There's nothing wrong with that. It was good, and we can get back to that. The eagle faces the olive branch, indicating peace is the preferred tactic, and that is very important. Peaceful tactics for change, right? We often see, and we're still seeing it today, and it really seems like the last 2 decades, and maybe that's just because that's been my adult life, but I see the tactics of change, and they're just not peaceful. They're often the opposite. It is through destruction that change occurs, right? Order out of chaos. It's sad because, again, it doesn't have to be that way. With some honesty, with some truth, we could continue to see this change where everyone has a buy-in. But unfortunately, that's just not the paradigm we're in yet. But maybe one day, as we work towards capping the pyramid, right? It's interesting. I've never heard someone describe the pyramid with the all-seeing eye on it, on the back of the dollar bill, the way the author has here. I've mostly heard it as saying, the unfinished pyramid means that the one world government hasn't been created yet. And until there's a one world government, the capstone can't be placed, right? But the author's saying here is that the pyramid is never going to be complete because the pyramid is only capped by the Spirit, right? The Spirit is not something that is in stone. The Spirit is part of our evolutionary process. And again, it will always be evolving throughout our lives. And since none of us are on the exact same journey, as a singular spiritual entity of humankind, we are always going to be evolving. We are always going to be placing that capstone on the pyramid, our spiritual capstone, right? It's always going to be different. But if we maintain these simple teachings and making sure that we are focusing on peaceful tactics, right, for our spiritual growth and through change, coming together in a multicultural way until maybe someday that race and culture and ethnicity, it won't even matter anymore. We'll all just be, New World citizens of the New World Order. Missions. Okay, so here we have what looks kind of like an atom or something, right? We have a circle that says First Earth Battalion. And branching out, there's all kinds of other circles that come from it. Things that say eco pioneers, urban pioneers, space pioneers, human disaster rescue groups, eco disaster rescue groups, natural disaster rescue groups, force of heart, force of will, force of arms, force of spirit. Then we have one that's called the star, where we see design, signals, support, people, and reasoning. Right? So I think what the author is trying to describe here is basically, he calls it a counter force company, a pioneer company, and a rescue company. Again, the author is talking about these things with a military style filter over them. Again, this is called the First Earth Battalion. Battalions are made up of companies, right? And each company has its own purpose. Let's see what he has to say about missions. Thinkers in the third wave know that collecting solutions just increases your options. World leaders need more options. The president needs a wider range of solutions to deal with the 1980s. Force as an option has lost much of its flexibility. We need increased creativity. Again, it's fun to think about. This author was worried about what was going to happen in the 80s. That was, over 40 years ago now. Force is still being applied in many situations throughout the planet. We see it today. It's difficult, it's scary, it's frustrating, causes additional division. Especially here in the United States, we are currently seeing two different wars being waged on the planet today. And the American people, truly, our military isn't yet, fully involved, but it's still dividing our country, right? Again, that game of division is being played right now, and the people are losing. They are once again allowing themselves to be placed into one category or the other, making the other side their enemy when it's just their own citizens. And again, we're talking about a situation that we're not even really involved in. Yes, our government is giving tons of our treasure to these wars. But as far as we know, our military, our boots aren't on the ground yet. They may be here in the near future, which would be tragic. But, the division is still there. And it's sad. Again, we're learning these tactics now. We're learning this stuff now, like we've talked about before. So when the events like this occur, we don't allow our emotions to take over. We take a rational look at what is happening. First we take a rational look at the event itself. And then we step back and allow, say, a few days or a week to go by. And then we look at the message about that event that is being sold to us. And when I say sold, I mean forced down our throats. Right? When we can separate ourselves for the moment from the emotional response to an event, then we allow a little bit of time to pass, and we look at the messages that are coming from the government, from the mainstream media, from the organizations, corporations, and institutions that run our lives. And when they are forcing a specific narrative, then we can start to have a better understanding of what's really going on. And again, that can only happen if you don't allow yourself to be emotionally manipulated by the events when they occur. And I don't want to get into specifics, but man, there are so many things that have happened in the last few months. So many headlines that just riled people up. Oh my gosh, they were just, their hearts were exploding from all of the sadness and the trouble. And over and over and over again, these heart-wrenching emotional stories ended up being lies. Ended up being completely falsified stories that were meant to engage us emotionally, to get us to fight against each other, not on the battlefield, but no, here in our own personal lives. Again, for a war that is on the other side of the world, that at this point has nothing to do with us. These are the tactics that are being used against us. These are the tactics that we discuss in Mind War. So we know how to deal with them. We know how to not become upset by these things when they're used against us. All right, folks, let's do one more page here before we finish up with this episode. Evolutionary Vanguard. So we see what looks kind of like a battlefield. And at one end of the battlefield, as we fight through these things, we see unlimited potential being the goal. And we see the courageous warriors, the warrior monks, the mind warriors, the citizen samurais on one side of the battlefield. But the only way we can get through the battlefield to this limited potential is we have to, number one, fight our way through the old rules, the old corporate controls, and then the old national controls. Again, this isn't about tearing everything down. This isn't about just attacking the organizations, corporations, and institutions that have so much influence in our lives, right? This isn't a program about some type of anarchism, okay? The reason that we go so strongly against these old paradigms, that we speak out so strongly against them, not because we want to destroy the organizations, corporations, and institutions, but because we want to evolve them. It's time for them to change. It's the people who are dragging these old paradigms, and we're trying to drag these old corporations, institutions, organizations out of the past. We're saying to them, you are no longer serving us with your current way of running things. It's not working for us anymore. We have evolved our thinking. We are evolving from the materialistic overconsumption into more conservative, environmentally friendly, conservation, planetary thought forms, right? We're moving away from destructive parenting techniques. We're moving away from destructive relationships. We're moving away from destructive media, and we want to heal. We want to get away from these old manipulative ways. But those tactics are so powerful. And honestly, when you use those type of manipulative tactics, they're very successful. It's why they work. It's why people use them. But again, that's why we're doing this work today. We're learning what those tactics are. Not so that we can use them to then manipulate the next generation into the next negative paradigm. We're learning these tactics of manipulation today in order to defend ourselves against them, in order to teach others how to defend themselves against them, and work on creating new healing paradigms. The First Earth Battalion of healing warrior monks, working alongside our healing citizen samurais, right? To make positive change. Again, back to evolutionary vanguard. We live in a universe that has evolutionary potential. Unfortunately, there are folks who would freeze the potential in order to maintain personal and corporate control. Therefore, warriors are required to protect the possibilities and nurture the potential. It requires courage to come out, reach out, and affect positive change in ourselves and in the larger systems we sow. It requires courage to love. It requires courage to accept that we ourselves can push the universe into higher states of order. The New World Order that we've been hearing about. The New World may be here, but the order is not. And it takes courage to come out here. It takes courage for me to sit here and make these videos, right? Talking about these things. Talking about the changes that are required. Going against those old paradigms that are so addictive. Our old cultural and societal ways of doing things that are so ingrained in our lives that we are just desperate and full of fear not to lose that addiction. It's so scary to make that change. I know it. I understand it. I've been through it in many different forms throughout my life. But folks, it can happen. When you make small changes in your life, when you start to see how just a small positive change, the ripple effect that it will have on your larger life, when we start to do that as individuals, we will come together in collectives of positive change, and it will radiate out into our communities, our states, our nations, then the world, then the freaking universe, and maybe the future, instead of being some type of, wasteland that was destroyed by nuclear war. Maybe we can move into a Star Trek-like future where we create all kinds of wild spaceships and we travel the universe meeting aliens and all kinds of wild things. Who knows? Again, these are fun concepts. This is taking very serious topics. We're putting kind of this fun, Earth first military filter over it. These are ways to look at maybe somewhat kind of boring therapy type options, boring self-help type ideas. And we're putting a fun spin on it. We're creating characters like Uncle Vic who wants you for the mind war, right? We create colorful art. We do these type of things to catch attention, make these changes fun, make this learning fun, right? Again, very serious topics, but we can talk about them in a lighthearted and fun way. We can create new characters that help us move in the right direction, a direction of healing, a direction of positive thought, a direction of coming together, right? So, folks, I think I've went long on this episode. Thank you so much for joining me on Mind War Season 2, Episode 2. It's great to have you here. I appreciate everyone that comes in and checks out the show. And remember, folks, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War. Thank you for joining me. Your friend Victor, the Occult Technician.